Sam Sorbo, and together with my husband, Kevin Sorbo, we've been in this business for a very long time, creating good, wholesome content for your entertainment. From Hercules to Andromeda to God's Not Dead, What If, Soul Surfer, Let There Be Light, and now Miracle in East Texas. Go to Sorbo Studios to find out everything about all of these projects and more. And you can support us there. We have all of our books there. Just check out sorbostudios.com. We created it for you. Sign up for the newsletter so that we can stay in touch, because as you know, social media is somewhat hostile to Sorbos and what we're doing. So join us at sorbostudios.com. We will look for you there. Thanks so much. All right. So welcome to the Sam Sorbo Show. I have a very special guest with me. This is a gentleman I've been following for quite a while. He was covering a rape gang, a gang of Muslim individuals in England, in Rotterdam, who were gang raping young Caucasian women, let's say. And he was being penalized for trying to uncover those things that they were doing. He has now branched into yet another story that is being hidden from the public view. He's a journalist and an investigative reporter. And so he is trying to bring his story to the forefront because he is now being penalized. I understand that he has legal bills mounting towards over $1 million at this point. He's a free speech absolutist. He's a political activist. He's also a critic of Islam. Tommy is well-versed in the Islamic religion. He's brought to light many of the issues that uncontrolled Muslim immigration brings with it. This is specifically over in England, but of course the entire world ought to take note of this. For example, Sharia law, when they bring Sharia law into Western communities, it doesn't end well. The backwards views on rape, on girls, on women, the industrialized rape and molestation of generations of British daughters, the slaughter of apostates, etc., which we've seen over in England. So Tommy Robinson, let me welcome you to the show. Thank you for coming on.
No, thanks for having me on. Thanks for having me on.
So I wanted to start with the Rotterdam gang because I want you to describe for us what was going on. I followed you briefly. Then they threw you in prison. And my understanding was that was just horrific. So take us through that. And then I want to talk about the film that has now been leaked. I highly recommend it. I want you to know my assistant has watched it 4 times because she just kept discovering more about what was going on through your film. So I highly recommend it. I've watched it myself also. Maybe I watched it more slowly than she did. All right, the floor is yours.
Okay, so Rotherham was the grooming rape scandal in the UK. That's the one that hit the headlines in 2015. I first started my activism in 2009. I formed an organisation called the English Defence League. We took to the streets in our thousands and we protested about issues that were being ignored or covered up. The main issue we focused on was the rape of our daughters in every town and city across our country that has an Islamic community. For years, it was covered up. I sat on debate show after debate show on national TV, being belittled and actually being ridiculed for trying to state that our daughters were literally being kidnapped and taken. They were being prostituted, pimped, raped, and even murdered. And the ethnicity of the perpetrators were never being looked at. The crimes were being covered up. The men were literally allowed to get away with raping children due to political correctness. And 2015 comes about and a government report come out where the government were forced. So basically, the English Defence League marched in towns and cities and they pushed this issue to the forefront. There's a journalist who was given an award-winning journalist called Andrew Norfolk, who won awards for uncovering this with the Rotherham report. If you actually listen to what he said he was forced to do it to take it back from the far right, which was the concerned working class people. So he had known about these gangs for years, but he was too scared to report on them because they were all Pakistani men, majority Pakistani Muslim men, and the victims were all white. So he was forced by the English Defence League. Lots of people lost their jobs, lost their livelihoods, were imprisoned during trying to force these issues to the forefront of the government and of the police. And it was successful. If you actually draw a graph of these gangs, so your listeners can understand, 4% of the British population are Muslim. 90% of the convictions for this type of gang rape of children are Muslim men, and 30% are called Mohammed. These are facts that no one can dispute, no one can argue with. If you go through the arrest rate from 2009, when the English Defence League formed, you can literally draw a line like this. A year later, the arrests go through the roof, where the police and the authorities, due to pressure, were forced because they saw 5,000, 10,000 angry English men in towns and cities screaming about the rape of their daughters. That is what brought it to the forefront. Police started arresting these gangs. In the first few cases, we heard some horrific stories. We heard about a young girl who had a hot iron rod with the letter M, and it was heated up, and it was printed on her backside because she was the property of Mohammed. We had another girl who had her tongue nailed to the table. Other young 11-year-olds were taken out to the woods and had petrol poured all over them. They were raped, and they were literally treated like meat by these gangs. Lots of the words the men used were to do with race and religion. These girls were horrifically targeted in the only serious hate crimes that our country's seen, yet none of these actions were treated as hate crimes or race crimes against pretty much every victim being white and every perpetrator being Pakistani Muslim. And that is what, and then in 2015, they started arresting them. 2017, they then put reporting restrictions on these court cases. So whereas before you'd get news every day because you'd be hearing about what's happening in these cases, and the cases might last 6 to 8 weeks, you'd hear the horrific details. Then the government decided to put reporting restrictions on every one of these cases. So you're not allowed to report on them, and you get one day's news at the end. So when the men get convicted, you get the headline, 30 men convicted of rape, of child rape. You don't hear the horrific abuse. You don't hear the detail. The media literally, and then these are only kept on file for 5 years, and then everything's deleted. All the transcripts are deleted. So really, the cover-up has just continued. And for example, in the town of Telford, where I've made a 4-part series called The Rape of Britain, where we go after these gangs in Telford. We go into their businesses. We spent 12 to 18 months with 12 victims, and we tell their stories. And when the men are named by more than 3 girls, we go after the men. Now, Telford and Rotherham, as you mentioned, most people in the world have heard of Rotherham. Rotherham and Telford are the only 2 cities where we've actually got the statistics and the numbers on how many victims there were, how many perpetrators there were. It's the only 2 cities in the UK, even though 60 to 70 cities have had these gangs and these trials come forward, only 2. Rotherham has a 3.7% Muslim population. Telford has a 1.7% Muslim population. There's no Muslims in Rotherham. There's no Muslims in Telford. Really, like my hometown has over 50%. Many cities in the UK have over 50%. So the figures you've got are for Rotherham, where we have 3.7% Muslim population, and we found out that 1,400 children were kidnapped, gang raped, and some murdered. And Telford has a 1.7% Muslim population, 1,000 children. In Telford, this is the terrifying thing, so people understand how vast and how big this problem is. Take the demographics of Telford. There's only 3,500 Muslims. That's all there is in Telford. 1,000 victims. When you take away the under 16s and the over 70s, you're only really left with, and you get rid of the women, you're left with 1,000 Muslim men. The police investigation identified over 200. Our investigation identified over 260. The independent inquiry, you're talking 20 to 30% of the men in that town have been raping our kids. 20% minimum of the Muslim men in Telford have been raping our children. That's the statistics that these are the things they're hiding. This is the things that you're not allowed to delve into. And but yeah, that's the brief. And then in 2017, I stood outside a court case, and some of these men, the trial was over. As they're walking into court, I said, "How do you feel about your verdict?" That's it. That's all I asked. I said that not all Muslims think like this. Not all Muslims act like this. In fact, I'm from a town with a 50% Muslim population. I know some wonderful Muslim men. They hate these crimes, but this is the numbers. This is what's going on. I was taken off the street, and within 2 hours, I was serving 13 months in prison.
13 months in prison.
Asking how you feel about your verdict.
The arrest, I think that was live streamed or something, because I don't know how many times you've been arrested, but I did see an arrest, and you actually show, I think it's the same clip that I've seen before in the movie, where they
That's
are
it.
arresting you for disturbing the peace and there is literally nobody around you.
There's no, yeah, disturbing the peace is what they said. Then they got me into the judge. They didn't ask me a plea guilty or not guilty, and the judge sentenced me to 13 months in prison. It took 12 weeks where I was on solitary confinement for 12 weeks. It took American congressmen commenting and arguing my case, European politicians, 30,000 people march on parliament, 700,000 people sign a petition. After 12 weeks, they got it before a judge, and the judge found that everything they'd done was unlawful and illegal, and he released me immediately from prison. But a year later, so I was released from jail. A year later, I produced a documentary called Panodrama. You should watch it. It's a total expose of the BBC, the BBC Panorama programme, which is the flagship investigative journalism of our country that we pay for as taxpayers. Their programme was doing a piece on me, so I sent a girl undercover into their programme. And the girl went undercover. She caught them conspiring to make up sexual allegations against me. She caught them telling people what to say. The man was telling them he was telling them, say this, say this, say this. He was telling interviewees what to say in their interview against me. So I produced that, and then they reignited the case that I'd already been released from jail for, and they put me back in prison again for another 9 months.
For the same thing.
They changed the law. They actually changed the law. They changed the law, and then when they took me to court the second time, because they'd already been proved, originally when they put me in jail, they tried to say I jeopardised the trial. Well, some of those Muslim men who were on trial had appealed their convictions based on the fact that I jeopardised the trial. It went to the judges, and when the judges watched my live stream, they said there's nothing he says that jeopardised the trial. There was nothing, yeah? So they couldn't try me on jeopardising the trial, which is what they'd originally put me in jail for. So then they said that I provoked fear by going up to the men and asking them how they felt about their verdict. I had made them feel fearful. You know, the rapists who end up getting 25 years, I made them feel fearful. And I had provoked my supporters. This is what they said when they redone me. They totally changed the context. In the video, in the live stream, anyone can watch this. It had 5 million views. I say in the live stream to the journalists out there, instead of harassing us, instead of chasing down us and following us, why don't you follow these men? These men are out on bail for raping children. They're still working in chicken shops. Go after them. So I'm talking to journalists specifically, saying go after them. The judge changed the total context of what I said that I had called on my followers to target the Muslim men, right, which was just a total absurdity if you watch the video. So anyone who watched the video then knows that our legal system and our judiciary is corrupt, because that is not what I said. But anyway, she sent me back to jail for 9 months. And this was all at a time when you have to understand that prior to our involvement or prior to our organisation, there was no grooming gang. The word that you now know as grooming, it's called grooming gangs. It's a rape jihad. It's mass groups of Muslim men kidnapping, torturing and taking English girls, racially abusing them, religiously abusing them and torturing them. It's not even about sexual gratification. Some of these men in our Telford documentary, The Rape of Britain, we've done a 4-part series. In one of them, we go after a man, we sit down with a girl, and he took her out, he dragged her out into the woods, he held her head, he ejaculated in her face, and then he urinated all over her. What this is about is degrading the girls because they're not Muslim. The comments say that in the court cases, for example, there was a Somalian case in the city of Bristol. He said it's his religious duty to do this. So many of them have come up with references from the Quran when they've been raping the girls. They've been talking to the girls, labeling them as references from the Quran, labeling them as gura, dirty, filthy gura, which is white meat. So all of these things are the things the media wish to hide, because now the media want to tell the British public that they're dealing with these gangs, but they don't want to. They want to hide. Why are these gangs doing it? Why are 90% of them Muslim? Why aren't the Hindus doing it? Why aren't the Sikhs doing it? How come it's only the Muslims that are doing this crime in this way? What is there about Islam and its teachings that are teaching its followers to behave in this way towards non-Muslim women? And that's the question you're simply not allowed to ask, and you're certainly not allowed to investigate. And unfortunately for the media and for the government, that is something that I continue to do, is investigate and highlight and totally embarrass them in their actions and their and the way they've dealt with these crimes.
At great personal cost, I would say, as well, right?
Yes, I've been in prison multiple times. It's been a difficult one because, say, for example, when they put me in prison for outside the court, they offered me a deal on this. And as I was getting in, if you watch the live stream, I'm actually I'm not smiling, I'm scared. But for my cause, for what I've tried to do, this highlighted it more to the world than anything else. People in Canada and America and across the globe probably know of these rapes in our country because of their actions of imprisoning me for that case. So
Right.
if you want to lock me up, and I said it to my children at the time, I explained it to my son on the second time they were locking me up. They offered me a deal to take a plea bargain where if I accept I was wrong, then I can go home and I don't go to jail. But my children were begging me to do that. My son was begging me to do that, not go back to prison. But I explained to him that because he's got two sisters, I've got two daughters. I said, there's girls your sister's age who are being taken, and they're being abused and they're being raped. And if they put me back in prison, this will be spoke about in houses across our country. If this saves one girl, if one parent wakes up to this crime, because the crime is it's a grooming process. So many parents don't realize what's happening to their daughters until it's too late, which sounds insane. But these girls are taken by the young Pakistanis. They're treated very well at first. They're given money, they're given cigarettes, they're given drugs, they're given alcohol. They then isolate them by teaching them that their parents don't trust them. They don't think you're a big girl. You can't, and they isolate them. And the worst thing parents can do is give up on their children at this time, because yes, their daughters become a handful. They go missing for days. They come home drunk. They come home on drugs, but they're being fed this drink and drugs. It's a process. And what the gangs want the families to give up on them. And then they've got them. And then they've got them and they can make money out of them. They can abuse them. They can rape them. They can treat them however they want. So this whole process of grooming, that their arrest and their wrongful arrest and their wrongful imprisonment of me done our cause a great service. It done to highlight these crimes. It was the best thing that could have happened. So yeah, I went to jail. In total I've spent a year on solitary confinement, which had a very negative effect on me. Which was it sounds mad, but I went into jail one person and come out a different person. I suffered after that with severe anxiety. I suffered with lots of crazy things that you wouldn't think you could get from just sitting in a room for 23 and a half hours a day on your own. But yeah, but as far as my cause goes, which is yeah.
Let me ask you. So I've got so many questions. First of all, you talk about young girls, but then you talk about girls who are smoking and drinking. And so what ages are we talking about for? Because there's grooming and then there's just abduction, right? So is there go ahead.
11 to 14, the majority of the victims, 11 to 14. So they're giving the children drink and drugs. Wow. They drug the children. This happened to a cousin of mine. You see, my cousin, when we grew up, she was a victim of these gangs in Luton. So I was very aware of all of this. I was very aware. And when we started speaking out, it just exploded. We started an organisation in Luton to talk about the issues in Luton, which then just went massive across the whole country. Divisions were set up of the English Defence League because what was happening in my town was happening in every town. And now the list of towns and cities that these Muslim gangs have been arrested and convicted, now you're up to 60 or 70 cities, but they're active in every single town and city. And when you read the government reports, for example, in the Rotherham report, which is now a government investigated report, so it's not me saying it, okay, it's not hearsay evidence. Two fathers whose 13-year-old daughters had been taken. Their daughters were in a house with 6 or 7 30, 40, 50-year-old Muslim men being groomed, abused and raped. The fathers went to the house to get their daughters back. The police turned up and arrested the fathers. They left the girls in the house. They arrested the fathers for causing a scene outside the house. These sort of things sound unbelievable, but this is the lengths that the police had gone to literally stand by idly, and facilitate the rape of our daughters. So when people say to you, how powerful is political correctness, that is how powerful it is. The fear of being branded racist was far worse. to all of these police officers. The ruining of their careers by having a racist tag because they'd arrested Pakistani men. And it's not just this crime. This crime was something that people got to see. This crime was one thing that we got to see. But this is the same in anything that affects the Islamic community. Female genital mutilation. 5,000 girls a year are having their genitals mutilated in illegal practices that carry 14-year prison sentences, but not one person has ever been convicted or sent to prison in the UK. Not one mum, not one dad, not one of them, because they simply do not deal with these problems that are culturally sensitive. So, there's so many crimes going along, underage marriage, all these things which Islam promotes, and no one gets dealt with. But victims of that all the way along are Muslim girls, Muslim women, our daughters. They're all victims of this pathetic, weak policing and government who are too scared to even talk about these issues, let alone crack down and deal with them.
Well, of course, the fear is that then they will try to adopt this as part of the legal system. That why wouldn't they just codify it as legal now?
There's two legal systems. There's the British legal system, and there's Sharia. Many of the Sharia courts, we have 100 operating in the UK. Many of them, so whether it be marital issues, inheritance issues, they deal with Sharia. They don't care about the British court legal system. It's dealt with within the community. We have such Islamic ghettos that they deal with themselves. Police aren't called into these. They're not called into these Islamic areas. It's dealt with by community leaders.
Right. The police won't even go in there because their vote doesn't count anyway. So why would they bother?
And they're scared to. They're scared of the repercussions every time.
Sure.
They can't.
Let me ask you.
They can't. Yeah.
My understanding is that your parliament needs to be retrofitted. The building needs some work done, and so they're going to move your parliament to another place called the Richmond House. The Richmond House is owned by a Muslim group. The Muslim group said, "Sure, you can move the parliament here, but you'll have to observe Sharia."
No alcohol, but that's like that's everything. I think every port in the UK is owned by Muslims, whether it be Qatar or Saudi, and I think that it only becomes a problem. I think there was a big problem in government because halal was being served, but it's only a problem when it affects them. Whereas in our towns and cities, we have to live under this. So I was born in 1982.
No, they agreed. The parliament agreed. They agreed. Okay, women will be segregated from men. We won't serve pork. I don't know what, right? The parliament just went along with it. So now your parliament is under Sharia law.
It's under Sharia law anyway. Many of our towns and cities are anyway. When they're appeasing them that much, when they're appeasing and they're scared to talk about issues, there's not been one politician since William Gladstone. There's not been one. There's one in the House of Lords, Lord Pearson. Other than that, there's not one that will speak out against Sharia or speak out against the influence of Islam in our country. There's not been one. No politician. Not one single politician that speaks up on these issues. In fact, they all just shout everyone down on these issues. And these are issues, if you look, I think I was due to come to America and speak at Congress. I had a signed invitation from 10 members of Congress to talk about freedom of speech. 45 MPs wrote to the American Parliament in London to prevent me going. That is
the American Embassy.
The American Embassy, yeah.
Okay.
That was four times more. Yeah, 4 times more than ever spoke about the grooming issue. So for me, it's like it's the insanity of what's important to them, and so many of them now with the Islamic vote bank politics, how influential they can sway certain seats in towns and cities because they organise themselves in a military fashion when it comes to voting. They're appeased at a huge level.
What about banking and financial? Do you have any information on the financial involvement, or if there are financial remunerations for going along with this kind of behavior?
Do you mean Sharia compliant banking?
Well, I'm sure you have Sharia compliant banking. I'm convinced of that, right? But are there behind the scenes money that's exchanged because of what? Go ahead.
So if you, in this latest film, Silence, we see the leader of local council who's a Muslim. His brother's an imam, His brother organises protests outside the school over to do with this issue that's happened. His brother, I don't know if you saw, there was a school in Batley in the north of England where someone showed a cartoon, the teacher showed a cartoon of Muhammad, and the teacher's now living in fear and he's living under protection. Well, the imam who organised those protests outside the school over that is the brother of the leader of the council of Kirklees Council. So he's the brother. So we have Mufti Pandor, we have Councillor Pandor, and then we have 100 arrests in Batley for rape of young children in grooming. One of them is also a Pandor. So we have alleged rapist Pandor. Now, in Huddersfield, which was actually the city of the Muslim gangs that I was questioning, when we look at this latest film, I've produced a film that exposes the total lies and corruption from council, judiciary, from all of them. I wear an undercover camera and I go approach school teachers. Now, there was a story that blew up onto world news. It was pumped around the globe. Now, when this story blew up, I was contacted by people at the school and parents at the school saying no one's being told the full truth of what's happening here. I made a video and I said, you're being lied to, okay? Because the British public had donated £160,000 to this Syrian refugee who was being portrayed as a victim. He was invited to Parliament. They were portraying that he was totally innocent and that the English kid who poured a bottle of water over him was a racist bully. When I went to the school teachers' houses, the first teacher that comes out, who's an Asian teacher, just says, Tommy, I took the money. I said, what do you mean you took the money? He said, they paid us. And he goes on to tell that he was paid £18,000 to prevent him ever telling the truth about the Syrian refugee. Now, who paid him the £18,000? Kirklees Council. Who controls Kirklees Council? Pandor, the Muslim leader, whose brother's the imam. And then when you look at both these people, in Mr. Pandor's council, which was the biggest grooming scandal of our country's history, so all of the girls that were raped were known to his council. All the men share the mosques that he does in that town. He's never said one word about this grooming, Yet he's made a big deal out of this Syrian refugee, and not just made a big deal, but paid not just one teacher. We find 7 teachers all paid. Chair of Governors paid. We find out that they spent £275,000 buying the silence of the staff at the school to make sure that the truth could never be told about this story. Now, this is so when we talk about that, that's financial incentives to control the narrative of a story. But this isn't just the council or the government. This is the media. And you find out then that they weaponized it against me. They hit me for £1.6 million. And they ruled in court that I'd lied with no jury. They ruled against every single bit of evidence, which unfortunately for them, the film has now been leaked. The film shows the evidence. The film shows exactly what's gone on. I didn't put this film out because I've been in possession. I made this film 2-3 years ago, and I've never put it out because I was told clearly by the judge, if the public see these covert recordings, then I'll be put in jail for contempt, which again there is no free speech. If the judge, and I sort of laughed when he spoke about giving an injunction. I told him the film's already in America, so you don't have jurisdiction over the United States, and that's where the film is. But if this is such a clear-cut case, why are you trying to hide stuff? Why don't you just let the public see? If this is a clear, because he ruled against 5 pupils, 7 teachers of undercover footage. He ruled all of them in his judgment. His judgment said that all of these people were lying. Sometimes people don't need a reason to lie; they just lie. Yeah, that's what he found, and he found the only person telling the truth was the Syrian refugee. And then he put a court injunction that prevents anyone from ever seeing any different anyway.
So then the question is, was he paid?
Was he paid, or what do they have on him?
I'm just saying, like, or what do they have on him as a judge, right? Then that's the question, sadly.
That's the question. I also found out that he fell out with his father before my court trial because his father joined a political party that I was part of. So he fell out with his own dad to do with me. And then he sits on my court trial. He should have excused himself from that court trial because he's already favouring against me, because he's never going to rule in my favour when he fell out of his own dad about me, is he? Right. So But again, I'm now in a position where this film has been put out. I don't know what they're going to do to me. Am I going to spend another year on solitary confinement because the public have been able to see the reality? I probably failed as my job as a journalist, because what I should have done is, when they give me that injunction 2 or 3 years ago, I should have walked out of court and played the film. But I was scared and I was worried and I didn't. So I failed as a journalist, and then someone in the United States has taken this film. They've got in possession of this film. 3 or 4 weeks ago, they knocked at my parents' home looking for me. And the film was released on Mice Media just, a week ago?
Well, hold on, Tommy. Okay, I just have to, for the record, I don't think you could say that you failed as a journalist. I think that, being cautious at a certain point sometimes just makes the best sense. So, you can hold yourself under scrutiny all you want, but at the time you thought you were making the right decision. Therefore, it was the right decision. And you can only know in hindsight that perhaps it wasn't. It doesn't matter now because that's hindsight. So moving forward, what I want to talk to you about the cost, because it's a great personal cost. I understand you are now divorced. You talk about how that's actually probably better for your kids, for your wife, because you are being targeted so severely, right?
You see in the film, they've tried everything with me over the years: imprisoning me, targeting me, raiding me, harassing me. It hasn't worked and it hasn't stopped me. And then they've gone for my family. And you see that in the film. And they have, this is from day dot. When we started the English Defence League, after 3 months, they arrested my pregnant wife. She was 6 months pregnant. They brought her in and they questioned her. They questioned her for 6 hours, 3 times, 3 separate times for 6 hours. They threatened her and told her she was going to be getting a long time in jail. And so all of these tactics have been from day dot. They went all around my family. They got my mum and dad's bank accounts. They searched through every one of my family. I went through their warrants. So at the start, they went through every member of my family, and they went back 6 years to try and find financial problems or things that they could pull everyone in. So, which is what they've done from start to finish. And they've continued to do it. And yeah, it did end up in my divorce. And it ended up in my divorce because my children were no longer safe in their home. And you see that on this film, Silence. They actively targeted my children's home. They hired extremists, sent them to, it's things that just sound unbelievable.
They doxed you. They told people where to find you.
They showed them where to find me. The solicitors, on the documentary, you see a solicitor actively seeks out and hires an Antifa extremist that he knows doesn't like him. And he gives him my children's address and sends him to their home. He then makes a video saying he's going to kill my kids. And the Solicitors Regulation Authority, in the UK, we have a governing body who make sure that our solicitors deal by their code of practice, deal properly. He hired an extremist, sent them to my children's home. He threatened to murder my kids. My family had to move their home forever. Little things like, for example, my daughter, in the 12 months prior to that, my daughter had 4 behavioural incidents at school. In the 3 months after that incident, she had 40. She had to. I had to have 3 children in 3 schools, 3 children in 3 different schools. They had to all relocate again. Now, since my activism in 2009, I think we've relocated 8 times into 8 different houses, which is a disruption for my children. It's a disruption to their lives. I've now had to relocate out of the UK 2 years. When all this hit the flames 2 years ago, they bankrupted me. They made my life impossible. 6 different bank accounts closed me down. PayPal shut me down. MailChimp shut me down. Stripe shut me down. Payment processors shut me down. Literally, all of them closed ranks and made my life impossible. And I laugh at the same time, because in the last 12 months, I've produced 6 of my best documentaries. So no matter what they've done, they've censored me, they've deleted me from social media, but the work has continued, the raising awareness has continued. We just don't reach the masses that we should. But I believe at some time in the future, again, we will.
So I know that I thought you had a crowdfunding campaign or something going for your legal fees. Is that correct?
So the legal fees, they bankrupt me. They done me on the legal fees. They're gone, yeah. £1.6 million. Someone set up a Give, Send, Go, which was an ability for people to donate, to support, so that for my family, not for me, because they will just destroy me, but for my family. For example, where I am now, my children have just been flown out to see me. It's £3,000 for the return flights. So my children have come to see me. They're here with me for another 3 days, which is great. But I have to locate myself in different countries now. And if I continue to want to have a relationship and a daily contact with all of my children. But someone set up a Give Send Go that can help with my children's safety as well. So,
Right.
which I'm appreciative.
I have to suggest to you that homeschooling is better than any school you can find.
You would not believe what's been going on at my kids' school.
Yeah,
totally
I wouldn't expose, if I were you, I would not expose my children to any kind of government institution, much less a school. I wouldn't allow the school to get their claws into my children, full stop. Your children are better off learning directly from you. You have so much more to offer them than any institutionalized schooling program. But that's because I'm a homeschool advocate, and that's the drum that I beat with everybody. But most notably, obviously, your children are under attack. I don't know why. I just think it's probably unhealthy for them to be exposed to other people like that. Many of whom are probably dead set against you, right?
Yeah, my thing's been difficult because I've always wanted to maintain as much normality in their life, even though mine's not been that normal. So I've always wanted them to.
You kind of blew it on that. Like that's that horse has left the barn.
I know. But they still, I know. And even with the school. So yeah, the school now is insane. Do you know how many different transgender kids are in my child's year at school?
Yeah, I wouldn't. So my children would 60. Never be exposed to that, because that's insanity, and there's no reason to expose a child to that. None whatsoever. Not to mention that those are the kids who are being groomed also, right? And they're being groomed inside the schools. You think the Muslim gangs are bad? Look at what the schools are doing to the children.
Well, to be honest, my push against Islam has sort of shifted in the sense that I saw that as the biggest threat. And now, since COVID, since the LGBTQ plus takeover, since all the sexualization of kids, I sort of actually started seeing many Muslims as our allies in this battle in the UK against what's being forced upon our children. It's insane. It's absolutely insane. And the reason why I say that about the Muslims is because they won't tolerate it. They won't bend.
That's true. You're absolutely right.
They will not bend.
And they're more fervent. Christians don't like it, but Christians are so tolerant that they're willing to allow for it. And the Muslims are like, no, not that.
Yeah. That's it. It's quite good to watch. I've been supportive of it, especially with the schools. So
maybe you can turn this whole thing around, Tommy. You never know.
It's the multicultural utopia that they think they've created, and that it's going to bite them on their own arse.
We can only hope.
I hope so.
All right. Where can people see the film? And then where can they find the other films? Because we need links and things.
Yeah. I have a Rumble channel, which is where you'll find my documentaries. I also have a Telegram channel, Tommy Robinson News. I'm not allowed to promote any film. I'll be imprisoned for it, to do with this latest leaked film. So I can't tell people where to find that or advise.
Oh, that's okay. I'll put it in the link. Shh, don't tell anybody, but go watch the movie. He can't promote it. Oh my, what is the world coming to when you are, you're clearly not afraid to speak your mind. The rest of us seem to be afraid to speak our mind. And when you speak your mind, no wonder you get thrown in jail.
Well, the sickening thing about it is not one single British journalist. This film's been leaked, which is a total expose of corruption at the highest level, of people being paid, of media twisting stories, faking stories, of a corrupt judiciary being weaponized.
Yeah, I want to point out that you take extreme issue with Piers Morgan and then another fellow who's obviously a very big time journalist over in England. And Piers Morgan, of course. Jeremy Vine, right. And Piers Morgan, of course, made a big splash in the United States. He's well known over here. He literally called for targeting of the young man who was supposedly the white bully child, who bullied, by the way, whose behavior was a result of the the Syrian refugee, saying that he was going to rape the young man's younger sister, 9-year-old sisters. And so Piers Morgan literally calls for people to target him. He should be punished and humiliated. And, you know, the worst thing is still too good for him, kind of thing. And in the documentary, you read some of the vitriol that is aimed at this young man, 15-year-old boy, not an adult.
The boy tries to kill himself. The boy faced something. I watched that child. Do you know what doesn't come out in the film is that boy lived with me for 3 years. So that boy Bailey lived with me until I left the UK. He lived with me. So I took him down after that. He lived with us. I got him a job. I watched how difficult he handled this as a young child. I saw he tried to kill himself just after Christmas. He felt in fear all the time. He suffered immensely with mental health problems in the follow up from this.
He's 15-year-old. He can't. He doesn't have the mental capacity. He doesn't have the maturity to deal with it. He's obviously a fine young man who felt that he's chivalrous, coming to the rescue of his younger sisters, trying to protect them, trying to avoid a situation where they would be accosted. And what does he get as his thanks is being targeted by violent individuals. It's an outrage.
It's an outrage, and no one would have cared if he died. That's the sad thing, and he's still suffering now. He's still suffering now. It's a total embarrassment of every institution in our country that should have been there to protect him as a child.
Where's Piers Morgan on this today?
Where is he? I'd love to know where he is. I'd love to know what he thinks now he's seen the evidence.
And Jeremy Vine.
He labelled Bailey as vermin. What do you do to vermin? You exterminate it. So and dehumanizing language, when you have such a platform on such a huge show that he had, it's important. The language you use is very important.
You have a responsibility. And by the way, the Nazis labeled the Jews as vermin also. I'll just point that out. There's a lovely parallel right there. And Piers really ought to watch his words.
Well, he demanded severe retribution and he got what he wanted. And if he was if he was a real man, he should review what's happened. He should apologize. He should reach out to Bailey. He should see the destruction he caused in that young man's life. Because Piers is a father as well. He's a father as well. So he should look at it as though it could have been his son. And unfortunately, not one single British journalist has even commented on this. We're sitting here. I'm sitting with Canadians. I'm sitting with Americans. I'm sitting with people all want to talk about this issue. Not one single British journalist has commented on this story, and they won't. Do you know what happened? Do you know, in my court case, when the 5 children got up to give evidence about what Jamal had done to them at school, all the journalists walked out of court. They didn't report it. So there was no reporting. All the reporting about this court case was Tommy Robinson done this, all the negative, poor Jamal, how bad I was, how it had ruined his life. The minute the evidence against him was to come up and people give evidence, all the journalists walked out of court. I just sat there like, is this for real? Is that how bent and corrupt you are? You won't even report the other side of the story. So, but here we are anyway. Sweating, sitting in my car.
Doing interviews from your car, exactly.
Doing interviews from my car. I've got my kids just waving at me over here as well.
Oh, Johnny, you have to go. You have to go back to your kids, and we certainly appreciate you taking the time with us. I'm very appreciative. I've been following you for quite a while. I really urge everybody to go look you up if you're not familiar with Tommy Robinson. Look him up. Look up his videos, his documentaries. Follow this. I think this is really a very, very important story because it really tells where we're headed as a culture. If this has now become acceptable, then everybody has a target on his or her back.
And what you need to take from it is they will use the court system to silence you. They will use the injunctions, the civil service. They will use it, and that's what this is a story about me, but it's not about me. Yeah, this could be anyone. So that's why I say just ignore the fact it's about me.
It could be anyone. You love the truth. You want the truth to come out. You want to protect young women. So we're seeing a little bit of advances in the United States. The what is it? Alabama just ruled, the University of Alabama just ruled that men wouldn't be allowed to compete in women's track, and transgenders wouldn't be allowed to compete in women's sports. Did I say track sports?
And it's just common sense. It's insane that we're even having these debates.
It's insane. It's insane. The movie that you made shows the insanity of it, and we need to get back to the truth. And you are leading the charge, and I commend you. I'm so grateful for you. And I'm grateful that you took the time with us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right.
Speak to you soon. Thanks.
This is the Sam Sorbo Show. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Sam. Bye-bye.